Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, Ryzen 5 benchmarks, and what's up with AMD's power plan. FreeNAS or hardware raid, the NES Classic is over, and Unigen's got a sick stress test for your GPU. All that and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 410, recorded April 13th, 2017. Ryzen 5 and the AMD power plan.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Go to ring.com/Twitch and get up to $150 off of a Ring security kit with their limited time offer. And by iFixit. You've seen their teardowns all over the internet. The free repair guide for everything and the ultimate marketplace for electronics tools and parts. For $5 off your purchase of $10 or more, go to ifixit.com/Twit and enter the code TWITCH at checkout.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most engaging. Well, you know what? We're talking hardware this week. We're talking processors. We're talking big announcements in the console world. Quite a bit more. Joining me back from his golfing vacation in beautiful South Carolina, Mr. Ryan Shroud.
Yes.
Welcome back.
I had to mentally check where I was at, and yes, it was South Carolina. Yes. Hilton Head Island, to be exact.
Very nice. Did you get some oysters while you were down there? Oysters?
No. I did make the mistake of the beach near this condo building we were at is very shallow for a very long time. So when in low tide, you can actually walk out like 400 or 500 yards, just out away from the shore. And I did that, and then I took a wrong turn on the walk back, and instead of walking through like the firm sandy part, I ventured into the soft mud sink to your knees part. And that was a little frightening because it was literally up to my knees when I was taking steps, and I thought one of these steps is going to go up to my waist, and I'm going to have to
pull your foot out.
Correct. And luckily, I had already taken my shoes off, so I didn't have to worry about losing those. But I was definitely worried that I was going to be down in my waist and have to be waving my arms and hope for a Coast Guard helicopter to come get me out of it or something. But that wasn't the case. So be careful. Quicksand, mud things, I guess.
I remember being in heading up in the low country north of Charlotte, and not Charlotte, and the coastal city where the Civil War started. There's a city name in my head right here. I can't remember. I am so sorry. But the seeing alligators for the first time, and realizing that in this sort of part residential, part vacation-y kind of place, that there were a tremendous amount of alligators, and all the locals were like, "Yeah, you don't leave your dog out." Yeah, it was Charleston I'm thinking of. Yeah, just don't let your dog out at night. Everything's fine.
Every golf course I went to down there, and I've done a lot of golfing in Florida and Alabama and Georgia and South Carolina, and there's alligators on every course at pretty much every body of water, and they vary in size from about yay big to 8 to 10 feet long, and you just stay away from them. It's fine. I haven't had any issues. But yes, I had also heard stories of like you just don't let your dog out at night, like to go to the bathroom by themselves without walking around with them. So things you don't have to worry about on the West Coast, Patrick.
I've been out and had coyotes wander by to see what me and my dog were doing at 2 in the morning.
Okay.
So that's because there were no alligators to eat the coyotes. Speaking of coyotes and alligators and eating, because this is a podcast about strange animals and their interaction with urban environments, Ryzen 5 review. 14, 1600, 1600X, 1500X. You guys got hands-on at PC Per with the 1600X and 1500X. I think this is a very similar story to what we saw with the Ryzen 7 processors, which, yes, if you're 1080p gaming, you can get higher frame rates out of an Intel part on most games. And then if you're doing anything that requires multiple cores or can take advantage of multiple cores in processing, or if you're really, really big on streaming your games while you're playing them, this is a much more compelling part, despite the fact that the frame rates may be slower for individual games.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good summation. The Ryzen 5 takes on Core i5, whereas Ryzen 7 took on Core i7. These are 6-core and 4-core parts, but what's important to note is that the Ryzen 5 parts all have their SMT enabled, right? So they're running twice as many threads as they are cores, whereas in the Core i5 line from Intel, that's not the case. The 7600K from Intel is a 4-core, 4-thread part. And, all the Core i5s are that way. But the 1600X, the Ryzen 5 1600X, is actually 6 cores and 12 threads. So not only do you get 50% more physical cores, you're getting 3 times the virtual core capability, virtual thread, the threading capability of the Core i5. And that's not a small difference anymore, right?
Right.
And, when we looked at Core i7, we had multiple comparisons to look at. You had the Core i7s that were 6 and 8 core processors in the Broadwell E line, and you had the Core i7s that were the quad core 8-thread processors in Kaby Lake. So, you can make the argument that, well, Ryzen 7 didn't have an inherent core count advantage because of the higher end Intel parts. But in the i5 line and in the Ryzen 5 line, that's not really the case. I
mean, it's pretty. When you look at a straight comparison, like a Core i5 7600K, 91 watt part, sells for $239. 14 nanometer, 4 cores, 4 threads, versus the Ryzen 5 1600X selling for $10 more, $249, another 4 watts, and it's offering 6 cores and 6 threads and comparable base clock and turbo clocks. Yeah, man, that's a whole lot more cores.
It is, and it's also worth noting that so there's a chipset difference too. AMD announced both the X370 and the B350 with the original Ryzen 7 release, but the main focus was on the X370 chipset. It was higher end, supports multi-GPU, has more USB 3.0 ports on it. But when you get into these lower cost parts, right, the 1600X is $249. And the Ryzen 5 1400 is $169, I think. Yeah. It is, you're in the lower class of part, and so you want to look at lower cost motherboards. The B350 chipset from AMD, not to be confused with the B250 chipset from Intel. Don't ask me why they did this. Is basically has the same feature set and capabilities with the exception of multi-GPU. So I think the B350 can only do can't do SLI, but I think it can do Crossfire. And it has, I think, 4 fewer USB 3.0 ports, I think, total available to the system. But other than that, like your overclocking capabilities are the same, memory overclocking capabilities are the same. It can use any R7 or R5 processor in it, and that's where you start to get into your $100 sub $100 video cards, motherboards for this platform, which maybe makes more sense when you're pairing it with a sub $200 processor if you get the 1500X, or $219 processor if you get the R7 or the R5 1600, right? So if you compare that to Intel's B250, the B250 doesn't allow you to do any overclocking. And including memory speed overclocking out of the box. That's something to keep in mind. However, there's way more Z270 motherboards out there than there are X370 motherboards, which just means there's more to choose from. And so there are some lower cost options. You can get Z270 boards for around the $100 mark for sure. So it's interesting to see the platform comparisons there. But you're right in terms of performance. Like if you look at single threaded performance again, the Intel parts are still better. The IPC of a Kaby Lake core is better than the IPC of a Ryzen core, of the Zen core. And even though they're running at similar clock speeds, Intel also has, like if you look at the top end parts, the 1600X and the 7600K, the Intel processors have a 200 megahertz advantage on base clock and maximum turbo. So there's advantages there. So if you're looking at single threaded workloads, if you're looking at audio encoding, if you're looking at everyday tasks and compute stuff, your sysmarks, your web expert benchmarks, you're going to see that the Intel platforms are either winning or way more competitive, despite having 3 times fewer threads than the Ryzen part, right? So yeah, if you look at that particular CPU arithmetic, you'll see the 7600K and the 7500K have an advantage. It's not a big advantage, but there is one there. But if you scroll down to the very next graph and you look at the multi-threaded performance, you'll see that the 7600K and 7500, which are the competitive Core i5 parts, lose by a lot to the 1600X and still by quite a bit to the 1500X because of its 4-core, 8-threaded capabilities right there. And so there's the other Ryzen parts in there for comparisons as well. Now, in those applications that are multi-threaded, if you do video encoding, if you do 3D rendering, if you're doing any of that type of stuff, you're going to see huge gains going with the Ryzen 5 parts because of that extra core and extra thread capability. It's super interesting to see the aggressiveness of AMD in this case, right? That they're they're willing to offer a 6-core part with 12 threads for the same price of the 4-core 4-thread, even though they were always going to lose in the IPC single-threaded performance metrics. They probably could have gotten away with maybe the 1500X being the top-end part, a 4-core 8-thread part, and it still would have beat the 7600K. But they still wanted to go above and beyond that. They're at a point where they're in their market share and in their mind share with enthusiasts in the community that they need to not just win, they need to win big when they do win. So that's why we see so much of that 1600X multi-threaded performance kind of scaling out there as well. And then on gaming, you're right. The Core i5s are probably still better for games, but I think the delta between Core i5 and Ryzen 5 is lower than the delta that existed between Core i7 and Ryzen 7, just because the core advantages, the core quantity advantages that Ryzen 5 have over Core i5 in many instances. And we have a whole page that looks at, Ashes of the Singularity, which is a game that had a software tweak, an engine tweak to give performance improvements. We look at Civ 6 and Wildlands. And in some games, the Ryzen 5 parts are very competitive. And in some games, a couple of games are behind by 10, 12%. And then I think maybe 1 or 2, they might be ahead by a couple of percent, but never by more than that. And then there's a couple where they're just dead even, right? So it's still variable. It still changes from application to application. I don't think, and I kind of had the same conclusion with the Ryzen 7. If your focus is I want the best gaming machine, then the Core i5 is probably still the best. And if you don't do anything else, but if your focus is I want the best machine total, I think Ryzen 5 makes a compelling case to be that one because it's good enough for the gaming side. And if you're going above 1080p, any of the differences we see are going to be reduced. And the potential benefit for any multi-threading, multitasking scenarios you're in are going to be substantial.
It is, yeah. If you're especially if you're doing anything with media development or coding or applications that use a ton of processors, man, the Ryzen parts should be on your short list, to say the very least. It's good stuff, people.
I do want to mention, I guess I should mention one other thing. If you go to the second page of that review, the one titled Memory Speed Scaling in Windows 10 Power Modes, it's worth noting on the memory speed, like we looked at 4 different speeds of DDR4 memory, 2133, 2400, 2933, and 3200. And we went through a whole bunch of applications and benchmarks to try to show you where these differences existed if they did. And in truth, other than a handful of games down towards the bottom, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Hitman, GTA 5, the differences in higher speed memory were minimal. Right. In Rise of the Tomb Raider, Hitman, and GTA, we saw 12, 14, and 12% performance improvements. I'm sorry, it's the next graph up for those different memory speeds. But if you look at, Cinebench, if you look at Handbrake, you're talking 1, maybe 2% differences for that scale. So, and then we'll talk about the next story in terms of power modes discussion. Since Ryzen 7 launch, there's been a whole bunch of people, whether it be editors, whether it be consumers, whether it be AMD, trying to investigate, like, why do these performance deltas exist in games and how do we address them? And there's like 3 or 4 different angles that people are going at, all of which add a little bit here and there that in total may end up being a better overall solution, making Ryzen more competitive in those such situations, specific situations, I should say.
12 or 14% gain on a game is, on one hand, something you'd be very excited about if it was an update like an NVIDIA or an AMD software update for the card, but it wouldn't be something you'd normally be like, woo, look at the difference in the hardware. Sure. I got a new GPU and it's 12% faster. It's not something most people get really excited about. And yeah, it's amazing. Looking at the high performance versus ballast, I was expecting like, I've got this new balanced power mode. I don't really understand how it's going to make things better. And the reality is it's optimized for NVIDIA processors, but it's not a magic bullet that's suddenly going to give you another 20% performance on gaming.
Right.
No matter what you might think.
When the Ryzen 5 stuff was being sent out and AMD called us and said, hey, we want you to test in high performance mode, we had this debate internally about how many consumers even know, like when you build a desktop computer, that you should go into your power options and adjust anything, right? And my understanding and my feeling was that, and I still kind of believe this, is that in general, people aren't going to do those types of things. They're not, they just want to, people are going to install Windows, they're going to install Steam, and they're going to go. And AMD kind of took note of that and said, okay, well, we're going to try to fix this in software ourselves by basically essentially releasing a driver for Ryzen that installs a new power plan in Windows and then has a little script that automatically enables it. And the essential crux of it is their power plan disables or greatly limits the amount of time that the cores are parked by the operating system, meaning they're put into their lowest possible sleep state, keeping them just barely active enough so that when the application does need that thread, does need that core, it spins up very quickly. And that is something, it's interesting to note that Windows 10 and Intel have been doing for a while, right? They, because of technology like speed shift, Windows basically gives all of the control over those types of things to the processor itself with Kaby Lake. And AMD just hadn't had that relationship, hadn't set up that scenario with Microsoft yet. And so this power plan is kind of like a halfway step to figuring that out. And they gave us a bunch of a big spreadsheet full of data about the performance uplift on their plan versus the balance plan, and you can see those are in the story. And then we did some of our own spot checks. We tested 5 or 6 games at different instances, and like Far Cry Primal, we saw no gain. Deus Ex, we saw 0.23%, but in GTA 5, we saw 3.5%. In Rise of the Tomb Raider, we saw over 5% performance improvements versus the regular balanced plan. So there are some benefits there to a handful of titles, and you look through. Obviously, AMD is in the data they provided is kind of cherry picking out the ones that make the most sense and kind of make the case for them. But a lot of the games are showing are older games, Thief or Mirror's Edge or Mafia 3 or Alien Isolation. These games are they're older, but hey, people are still playing them. And these are again just examples of scenarios that do see potential benefits. You couple that with maybe spending $20 or $30 extra to buy DDR4 3200 memory and setting your Ryzen at that, and you combine those two things, and maybe you would combine that with updated BIOSes from Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte that have the AGESA 1004 code updates that improve latencies and the ability to scale to higher memory speeds, and it will make a difference. The problem is that we have to have this discussion at all, right? That this type of information wasn't packaged up when the Ryzen first released, that we kind of had to figure it out as we went. And that's always going to leave some people confused. It's going to leave some people angry, and some people who just like only read headlines from 2-3 weeks ago, and now that's where their mindset is that Ryzen is bad at gaming. And so no matter what changes they make or offer, it's going to take way longer to re-educate people that way than the initial education, the initial information dump at the outset. So I don't know. It's interesting to see all these different things, and you don't want to have to make all these changes, install a driver with a power setting, and upgrade your memory, and those types of things. But if it works, then AMD is going to push it, and they're going to recommend people do that.
One step at a time, my friends. And then they get a new Microsoft update, and then everybody has it, and everybody's happy.
That's true.
Unigen superposition GPU stress test released. I had no idea we needed a better stress test for our engines, for our GPUs.
Well, you always need more stress tests for your GPUs. This one goes up to 8K now, so there's that as well. I mean, the essential story here is that this is an upgraded benchmark from the guys that made Unigen Heaven, the Unigen Valley benchmark. This is Unigen Superposition, and it has some. It looks nice. It's just an updated engine. It's very pretty to look at. There's a free version that lets you run through stress testing and whatnot, and then you can upgrade a little bit more to get ones that do other demos and stuff. There's a virtual reality version of this benchmark, so it'll actually run in the headset and do some testing with you that way. And then there is the 8K iteration for the person that has the 8K display, I guess.
That guy or gal.
That one guy. Yeah. But it's neat to look at. So this is, one of the benefits of being a PC gamer is that if you get really cool hardware, and sometimes you just want something to run and show off to people, or maybe to yourself, what your hardware can do. This is one of those things. So I haven't spent a lot of time with this yet to see if we're going to actually integrate performance results into our reviews in the upcoming future. But it seems like a possibility.
It's a gorgeous benchmark. I'll be very, very curious to look at the performance. But,
did you know YouTube supported 8K 60 frames per second video?
I'd heard it, but I hadn't actually bothered to go out and search for any of it.
We've seen many people try it, and nobody's computer seems really able to play it back reliably. Right. Yeah, actually, and as I try to play it on my laptop now, it is pegging my CPU at 100%. So there you go.
You know what? I'll just downloading because it hasn't been exciting enough configuring Skype for this particular session. I'll just start downloading that 1 gigabyte Unigen superposition benchmark in the background. Oh, it's only going to take another 4 hours. Maybe longer.
Maybe my one complaint is they use really slow download mirrors. So,
well, the upside it should disrupt our Skype conversation. You know it's terrible when you're in the tub, bathing a child, bathing the dog. You're in the back of the house. You're in the basement. You're running a benchmark and just staring at the benchmark, and you don't know who's at the door. Door rings, you hear a noise, want to know what's going on. This episode of This Making a Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. What goes on at home when you're not there? The Ring Video Doorbell uses advanced motion detection technology so you can see and speak to whoever's standing in front of your door. It's cool. Using your smartphone. Ryan is the owner of 2 Ring doorbell cams. Have you recently checked out, have you gotten their new the floodlight cam? Motion activated HD security camera with 2 high beam LED floodlights, a 110 decibel siren alarm, and 2-way talk. So you got motion zones with that, dual sensors with object and facial detection, hardwired, weatherproof, available in black or white. Uses the Ring app to flash the lights, sound the alarm, or zoom into focus. And if that annoying teenager is coming by to date your daughter or something, you can just fire up the siren and zap them with the lights. You can use the Ring app. Basically, it's cool, right? It's part of Wall Street Journal's Best of CES 2017. You're using one at home and one at the office, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah. And they are infinitely useful in my experiences. And I still when I was in Valdosta, Georgia, 2 weekends ago, whenever it was, and we were sitting at a Cracker Barrel with my aunt and uncle, and I answered a ring from a shipment delivery guy and told him where to put the box. They were astounded by the marvels of modern technology. And for me, I've been using it for a year, a little bit longer than that. It's just like now, if I didn't have it, I don't I don't know what I would do. It's like internet on an airplane. Once I used it a handful of times, it was like, well, now I have to pay for this every time, and that's unfortunate. But not with this. It's good stuff.
Good stuff, people. Should you find yourself wanting to have a more secure lifestyle, I should also point out, right? They've got the Ring of Security kit. You can monitor every corner of your property. All the kits include a Ring Video Doorbell, your choice of either 1, 2, or 3 floodlight cams. Pro kits have the Slim Video Doorbell Pro. It's got crystal clear 1080p HD video and night vision. Hardwired, so you never need to charge it, change batteries. That's a good thing. The Ring Video Doorbell and floodlight cams, they install in just minutes. Working together, they provide 24/7 monitoring of your entire home, whether you're in your bedroom or thousands of miles away. You can connect your Ring Video Doorbell with your favorite smart locks and hubs for added convenience, monitoring, and security. Join the millions of homeowners who protect their home with Ring. For a limited time this week, and Computer Hardware listeners can get up to $150 off one of the Ring of Security kits. Go to ring.com/Twitch. That's ring.com/TWiCH. We want to thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware.
Indeed.
Get your security on, people. I like the fact that there's now floodlights. It's very tempting for me. Light them up. Oh, my goodness. Lian Li PC Q17 WX Mini ITX Aluminum Enclosure Review. We've been lagging. It has been a couple of episodes since we've had a Mini ITX enclosure. Sebastian wrote this one up, PC Per. I can't decide if it looks smaller or larger than it actually is, but it is a gorgeous case.
It's pretty small actually, but the key is that it fits full-size components, not motherboards, mind you. But right. It will fit a full-size graphics card. He had an X9 or an R9 290X reference design in there, which is a little bit louder and a little bit more difficult to cool. So it's kind of a worst-case scenario for setting up a system like this. But a full-size cooler to go with the Mini ITX motherboard. That's probably the best picture to start with, because if you look at it, the angles are a trick of the eye. You can clearly see the square frame that the Lian Li chassis uses, and then the front part is just kind of a plastic molded piece to give you the front angle part. But they don't waste that space. You can actually put a slimline optical drive inside of that, or you can mount one of your drives and your SSDs underneath that as well. So it's not a complete, for appearances only type of thing. And you can see, if you look at the top of the chassis, there's actually grommets for water cooling to be mounted on top of the case. So you can, if you want to use a bigger, like a 240 rad, you can do that, whether it be a custom or a kind of self-contained water cooling loop as well. So it's an interesting mix.
As somebody who's literally bolted a car radiator to the side of a PC case, I'm down. I completely understand when Sebastian says the look of an external radiator is hardly ideal, because it ends up sticking out of the top of the case. There's no cover for it. There's no way to hide it. You just have this giant fan and radiator bolted to the top of your case, which I've done. Yeah. I agree. It's not the most stylish looking thing.
No.
But then again, if you're, most people probably aren't liquid cooling, so it's not an issue. Looks like a decent amount of space behind the motherboard or below the motherboard plate to stash cables, which is part of why I fell so in love with the Corsair Carbide case. Is it looks empty because there's so much space behind. There's like an inch of space, it feels like, behind the motherboard to route all the cables. And it's the only time I've ever feel like I did a decent job of cable management. Of course, if you look behind the motherboard, it looks like, a copper spaghetti-eating monster vomited back there. It's not a cheap case. It's like a $190 case.
Correct. Yeah, Lian Li cases tend to be on the expensive side. They're all aluminum. They're a little bit lower volume as well. But the Lian Li cases have always been known to be more expensive than kind of semi-equivalent options there as well. But I mean, he seemed to like it. He thought it was a premium construction. It felt like it was built very well, room for full-size components, pretty good cooling with all the vented design elements. Easy component access from push pin style side panels, so not even thumb screws in that regard, but nice. Limited storage space for some of those components. And he mentioned wanting to see tempered glass for that price, tempered glass window for that price, as opposed to what they included. So
there you have it.
Anytime you get into these micro ATX designs, they're always the most interesting because they vary so drastically from unit to unit, like the top mounted versus the front fascia that you can put an SSD in, and things like that. So choosing a case for a build is tough if you're not just looking for like a rectangular shaped box anymore. So, but it's good to have choices.
It's good to have choices. There are some strange choices out there. Something I did not expect to see anytime soon, but has leapt up and kind of fascinated me. The crew over at Tech Report have a review of Epic Gear's Morpha X modular gaming mouse. And I have a couple of gaming mice in here for review, which is part of why I found this so amusing. One, because it's amazing how a company can produce a fantastic, $100 keyboard and then produce something that makes a Microsoft mouse look like a piece of luxury equipment. I'm thinking of something completely different. What you're looking at right now is Epic Gear, the Morpha X modular gaming mouse, and it's kind of crazy. It will actually allow you to do things like swap switches inside of it, should you want to change the switches, right? It looks fairly basic. It's got a scroll wheel, an extra button, a left and right button, which I'm a big fan of. And so they've got a huge array of like plate options in the waist. Might be a little higher than some people like, but it's like 4 or 5 gram removable weights. So you can take the mouse from 92 grams to 112 grams without the cord, which is pretty slick. But I love the fact that you can change the sensor modules inside of it. So it uses stock PixArt's PMW 3360 optical sensor, which has like a 12,000 DPI resolution, tracks at 250 inches per second, or you can do the ADS 9800 laser sensor. So that does like an 8200 DPI resolution and tracks at 150 inches per second. I thought it was pretty slick. Really good read up at techreport.com, and a mouse that offers you probably more customization than you will know what to do with unless you spend a lot of time thinking about customizing your mouse. Sounds kind of rude to say it that way. The other thing that happened this week is Amazon's developed a dev kit. So if you're a hardware developer, and we know there's some listening right now, they've decided to offer the ability to access their microphone technology and their voice processing technology. So the 7-mic voice processing technology, you sign up. If you're picked, like selected third-party manufacturers, they're going to get access to the dev kit, Amazon software for Wacom word recognition, beamforming, noise reduction, and then the reference software that they offer for using the voice service with the microphone kit. So I thought that was kind of curious that that they're going to take the next level of not just making the voice service available, but to start making their hardware and their microphone array. It's interesting to look at that too, because it's the 7 mics are in a circular array, and that's what allows them to do the beamforming and noise reduction, echo cancellation. Be interesting to see what shows up in the next year or two using the Amazon voice system. So just something to think about there.
Indeed. Yeah.
I'm laughing because I just saw the note from our beloved it says, make sure in the next story not to say the word that I said, ALEXA.
Yeah.
And then followed by, no.
When I saw his note, it did remind me of the Burger King Google Home fiasco that occurred yesterday. Did you see that?
What was the problem with that? I heard about it, but I didn't quite catch up to what was going on.
Burger King released a commercial on YouTube. Well, a commercial that basically said, we only have 15 seconds. We can't tell you all about the wondrous Whopper and like all the ingredients that go into it. So instead, how about we do this? And they did the OK G word. What is the Whopper burger? And then when you do that, all the Google Homes, all the phones, even the Echo does that, where it just basically reads you the first paragraph from the Wikipedia entry, and it went through the whole thing. But it only lasted like 3 or 4 hours before Google shut it off. It basically listened for that specific waveform and didn't enable the Google Assistant anymore when that was enabled, or when they tried to activate it that way. So, because apparently also some people were going in and editing the Wikipedia entry in real time, and the Google Assistant was reading the edited versions that had, things in it that maybe you wouldn't normally say out loud, said by your Google Home or whatever device. So it was pretty funny. I think it's a great idea. They probably should have cleared with Google first, and maybe like through Wikipedia, like locked the Wikipedia entry first, and because it's not only a really good Burger King ad, I think it's a good ad for Google Home, Google Assistant as well, right? Like, we don't have time to tell you about this, but your assistant does, and you have access to this thing 24 hours a day. But instead we got left with what we got left with. But
sometimes it's all you get, man.
It's true. It's true.
Man, I was down at Can Jam this weekend, which is a headphone gathering down in Southern California. And one of the things that was kind of crazy is Ultimate Ears, the earbud company. And a lot of professional musicians use Ultimate Ears. And traditionally, they do a custom mold of your ear. They put goop in your ear, silicone, something like that. And you sit there and wait for it to seal. And they actually now have the ability to 3D scan the inside of your ear. So it takes about 10 minutes. They put kind of a halo on your head. You tilt your head and look up to the right, and then they run this thing in the side of your head and scan it, and you end up with a complete 3D image of the inside of your ear canal, and then they print those out in 3D. I thought it was interesting. And then I'll speak to these really, really briefly. Mr. Speakers was there, and Mr. Speakers is this hardware company down in headphone company down in Southern California, and they started doing mods for Fostex T50 RPs, which is an inexpensive entry-level planar magnetic, and then they started releasing their higher end, their own homegrown planar magnetic headphones, and they're working on an absolutely amazing electrostatic headphone that's going to sell for like 10% of what they usually sell for. What you're looking at right there is their new Aeon. And, it's a $699 headphone on pre-order. It's going to be a little more. It's going to be $799 once they start selling them for reals, which is outrageous if you're, using the earbuds that came with your phone. But that's actually using the same kind of technology they use for the drivers and the magnet structure they use with their $1,800 headphones. So in that sense, it's very, very similar to what we saw with last year with Odyssey when they came out with the signs, where it's that looks a little more expensive than I'm used to paying for a headphone, but it's a fraction of the price for what you would pay for their flagship devices. The sign on ear headphones, Odyssey sign on ear headphones, they sell for $449. Which is, I think less than a sixth of what Odyssey's high-end stuff sells for. And Odyssey actually had a couple of products. They're going to be in the Apple Store now with a custom version of their iSign in-ear, and then an open-ear version of the sign-on-ear headphone, which is a fantastic headphone for the money. Sorry, I should have gotten a tighter shot of that headphone for everybody. But they have an open-back version of that now, which will give it a much larger sound stage. Blue Wave Audio, which did an Indiegogo recently, they have a really nice, it's a wireless hi-fi amplifier. So if you have a set of headphones you love and you want to use them wirelessly, for $99 you can pick up their Get, which has a really nice digital analog converter, a headphone amplifier, and about 6 to 8 hours of battery life. It's got aptX and aptX HD for your next generation Android phones. I'm pretty sure Apple's never going to go anywhere near aptX because it would be too easy and too helpful. Built-in microphone on that one. I want to build one of those into a set of like Sony MDR 7506s. But I was like delighted with how solid their prototype felt, and B, with the audio quality. It's going to drive everything but the biggest headphones. So just wanted to drop in a few shining objects from down at Can Jam 2017. I wish I had that video. I'll have to get the video of the scanning. It was one of the most useful things I've ever had done, involving sort of a 3D scanning situation. Because if you've ever had... but go ahead.
I have oft considered having custom molded earbuds made, but have never gone through. So
it's time, man.
I don't disagree.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit. We love iFixit. Oh my goodness. More than 22,000 free repair guides and 90,000 troubleshooting solutions. The good people at iFixit are the experts in consumer electronics repair. iFixit provides all the repair knowledge you need for free. They also sell a wide array of parts and tools to help you get the job done. They know what they're doing, so they built a toolkit that does it too. The ProTech Toolkit. I love this thing. It's so good. Completely reimagined design, but just as rugged and portable as before. I mean, it really shows their obsession with detail. A nice durable canvas case, hand-selected high-quality steel bits, custom anodized aluminum driver handle. They've thought of everything, so you only have to worry about the fix. The iFixit 64-bit driver kit, precision ESD safe tweezers, a wide variety of plastic opening tools, picks, spudgers to safely work on tablets and smartphones, a suction cup to get the display off when you're doing a display repair, a metal spudger, and I really like iFixit's rubber-handled Jimmy Pry tool. They make that in here. That's the one. Yeah, that's it, people. This is the ProTech Toolkit. I have one at home. I have one at work. I've used it from everything to eyeglasses to toilets to iPhone repairs to swapping a battery in my buddy's iPod recently. That was emotionally traumatic. This is the last precision toolkit you'll ever need, and that's why the ProTech Toolkit is backed by a lifetime guarantee. It's really simple. iFixit just wants you to keep things running for as long as you can, keep them out of the garbage dump, make things useful and helpful. That case, by the way, that you were looking at right there, the driver kit, it's sweet. It attaches magnetically. You can flip the lid open. You can use the back of it to hold parts magnetically. You can drop parts into the lid if you want to. And it's sweet. It is a bunch of good stuff at a great price with a lifetime guarantee. People at iFixit.com never stop repairing. And with this toolkit under your belt, you won't either. Head over to iFixit.com/twit and use the code TWiCH at checkout to save $5 on your purchase of $10 or more. Even if you don't buy anything, you can still use their free repair guides, troubleshooting answers forum, and other educational resources on the website anytime your tech has an accident. We want to thank iFixit for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware, and that's iFixit.com/TWIT, and use the code TWICH at checkout to save $5 on your purchase of $10 or more. Go forth and fix things, people. We were talking about this right before we fired up the show. Nintendo has discontinued the NES Classic Edition, which my partner in crime on Tech Thing is absolutely giddy about that because A, I think she already owns a couple, and B, I think she just poached a couple off of eBay for selling as people are desperate about this. Yeah. But The Verge, you're looking at the Verge write-up. I guess it was first reported by IGN. And this is the statement they released, Nintendo. Throughout April, Nintendo of America territories will receive the last shipments of Nintendo Entertainment System NES Classic Edition systems for this year. We encourage anyone interested in obtaining this system to check with retail outlets regarding availability. We understand that it has been difficult for many consumers to find a system, and for that we apologize. We have paid close attention to consumer feedback, and we greatly appreciate the incredible level of consumer interest and support for this product. If you missed us talking about it earlier this year, or actually I guess back in December, it's like 30 classic NES games in a little tiny replica of the Nintendo NES. And it has been impossible to find pretty much since it launched, selling out constantly. But apparently they've sold several 100,000. At least they were like at 200,000 by December. So,
yeah, I thought they had sold I had read that they had sold 1.5 million in January, like through January. Mm-hmm. And the statement just doesn't make any damn sense. We understand that there have been a lot of people that haven't been able to buy this thing, and we've been listening. So as a result, we're going to stop making them.
Maybe maybe somebody's brother at Nintendo. This is a joke, by the way. Don't sue me. Maybe somebody's brother at Nintendo North America had been poaching these on eBay or selling these and inflated prices on eBay, and the price was starting to go down. I mean, it makes no sense to me. We have an incredibly popular product that stokes nostalgia about our entire product lineup and seems to be making people think warm and fuzzy things about Nintendo, despite the fact that we've finally, I don't get it either. It makes no sense. But maybe somebody was like, you know what? We can't be selling this and the Switch at the same time because we're a serious gaming company.
I was trying to figure out, like, I was trying to think of a technological reason why. Alan suggested somebody suggested, maybe they were upset that the DRM had been broken and people were hacking it and kind of using it for other purposes or adding extra games to it. But like, that's been going on for decades anyway. And Raspberry Pis exist. If that was somebody's stuff, something somebody wanted to do, they have plenty of opportunities to do that. There's no reason to cancel the one way you are actually making money off of that process completely. And it's not like there's like a high-powered chip in there or something that's hard to get a hold of. I don't know. I come up with nothing other than some companies just are bad at being companies sometimes. And I don't know what else to say. Like, I can't think of anything. So, and I'm one of those people that was unable to get one. When Best Buy announced that they were going to have some available at noon on a Wednesday, a couple of weeks ago, I was there kind of refreshing the page, and I had added it to the cart, and it wouldn't finish the purchase process because the servers were bogged down. And then by the time it cleared up, they were out of stock. I did that a couple of times. And here I am trying to give Nintendo some money, and they won't let me. And now they definitely don't want me to. So,
fine. Well, they still want your money. They just want you to buy a Switch. And you already did that. So they got you, Ryan.
It did. Yeah, well, that's true. They got me. Damn.
Speaking of getting you, Microsoft's going to reveal Project Scorpio's Xbox console, E3, Sunday, June 11th, 2 p.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. This is apparently going to be all of the details they haven't released yet, which will mean all of the details they haven't released yet that they don't feel like saving until the actual launch. Yeah, it's that GPU is like 4.5 times as powerful as the Xbox One, 1.5 times as powerful as PlayStation 4, and you will have an integrated power brick in Project Scorpio, so you don't have a big, stupid, giant brick to drag around. Not that I've been doing that with something and been really irritated about it lately, but the one of the things I tweeted about the review of that developer's kit, and one of the responses I got was like, who can actually see the difference between an Xbox One and 4K and actual 4K? Who cares? It's not going to do. I don't hear anything about VR. What's the point? And I think the point is trying to close the gap between, medium PC gaming graphics and consoles. I mean, that's my lack of anything better to say theory on that one.
Yes, I would agree with that. I will make a comment. They did, I think a statement came out yesterday about VR where Phil Spencer said that they planned to be open and inclusive when it comes to VR, making me believe that they're going to not build their own headset and instead maybe allow you to hook up your Vive and or your Rift or future versions thereof to the Xbox Scorpio. And that's actually really compelling, right? I mean, they're combining the Windows environment with Xbox, with PC gaming, and they're doing a whole lot of work in that. It seems like a pretty big jump to suddenly support Rift that is its own ecosystem and its own store and all that type of stuff in Windows or in the Xbox platform. And the same for the Rift, where it's all it's same for the Vive, where it's kind of all through Steam VR and Steam itself. Steam seems less likely to want to work with Microsoft than Rift would be, than the Oculus team would be. But that to me is more compelling than the PSVR, and also gives you the idea, the potential idea that, hey, like the VR headsets will be variable, upgradable, different prices, different segments. Room scale versus not room scale, and because in theory you're basically building the Scorpio is a powerful PC that's running a lighter operating system than Windows 10, and so that actually has the potential to be an even better solution, right? I mean, 6 teraflops is above the minimum requirement for PC-based VR today, so I see that as another potential positive. I don't know how much they'll say about it as early as June, but I will be asking. That's for sure.
I guarantee they will say less about it than you want to hear.
Yes, I would think so.
I feel comfortable with that guess. At Meisterberger tweets, at Patrick Norton, FreeNAS or hardware RAID? This is a great question. In part because you can use hardware RAID inside of FreeNAS. And I would probably say, do you want FreeNAS or Unraid or a Mahi-Ohm server or Open Media Vaults or NAS for free or StableBit from CoveCube as all options if you need a way to store things in your home, whether you're talking about like I have to store 15 terabytes of Blu-ray rips, or I have to store 90 gigabytes of FLAC audio, or I need something to back up my laptop to, or but I would probably say there's nothing quite like FreeNAS, but FreeNAS, it's like we're going to build this industrial enterprise grade storage system. You're going to want a little bit more hardware than you think you need to run FreeNAS. I think running software on a FreeNAS RAID is, a software RAID in a FreeNAS is perfectly acceptable. Cue Alan gesticulating wildly from the back of the PC for offices right now. But, FreeNAS, it takes work to get it configured and set up, but it's a fantastic piece of hardware. NAS for free, is a split from that. It might offer you a little more support if you want to run it on older, desktop PCs. But essentially, a FreeNAS, you're going to use your desktop PC. You're going to convert a desktop PC into a network-attached storage box. Similar stories for Open Media Vault, Mahi-Home. LimeTech's Unraid gives you the opportunity to sort of share your gaming desktop. You can either run it as a standalone device or run it, say, on, like my crazy Ryzen 7 box down here. I could run that as a discrete Windows 10 gaming system and run Unraid at the same time without doing a huge amount of impact on that, which is something I've been meaning to play around with. But, Unraid's pretty crazy because it's not just network-attached storage, but it's also an application server and a virtualization host. But I would say FreeNAS. Experiment with FreeNAS to see if you like it. If it was going to be like, I need the fastest RAID possible in my desktop, then I would probably be telling you to go with hardware RAID on that one. So
cool.
And we got a tweet from Dave Darav, a.k.a. David Hinkst, or DAV3, DARAV3. Mr. Hinkst says, I would like to point out that there was a Note 7 debacle, not an S7 debacle, and that the S8 does have a home button, not a physical button, but it has one. And he's basically like, you guys made 2 mistakes on Android in 2 shows, and you should stop covering Android. First of all, I think he's picking nits on the S8 button. I thought it was pretty obvious I was referring to a physical home button. I think physical buttons are easier to find than virtual buttons. But let's make it clear, there is a non-physical home button on the S8 screens, number one. And number two, and I apologize if I've created any confusion in the audience of This Week in Computer Hardware by referring to the Note 7 debacle as the 7 debacle or the S7 debacle. The phone that burst into flames, creating a $2 or $3 billion recall and creating some issues with consumer trust with the Samsung mobile brand, was the Note 7. The S7 did not burst into fire in anyone's car or plane or anything like that. So now that I've made that clear, I still have the question, will S7 sales be negatively impacted by the
S8.
Note 7? Excuse me, S8. See, I'm going again. I shouldn't cover Android hardware. I'm incompetent. Will S8 sales be negatively impacted by the Note 7 debacle? And I think that's a big question. I think it's great that Samsung has stepped up and owned the problem and has made sort of, has basically made their attempts to prevent the repetition of another flaming phone battery problem as one of the features of buying an S8. I'm really curious to see what the sales numbers look like and how they do, because it's a fantastic.
Another question is, will the supposed refurbished Note 7s have any impact on S8 sales, either because of actual sales or mind share? I just saw a debate earlier today about it, and There are a lot of people who say that Samsung should basically be throwing all of those things in the garbage, having them recycled. Any additional press that phone and that name gets being out there is going to be a negative for the Samsung phone brand overall.
Right.
You know, as again, here I am talking about it, right? So, don't remember those phones that caught on fire. So, you know, I think it's absolutely the Note 7 debacle affects S8, S8 Plus sales. It's just a matter of how much, like what their guesstimation is on how much it will affect sales if they just never mention the term Note 7 again, or if they mention it enough times just to sell the refurbs for $100 or $150 or something like that to get some of that initial hardware cost back.
My understanding is they won't sell them in the U.S. Those will only be available outside of the U.S.
Right. Correct.
You know, but yeah, you're talking about 4.3 million recalled phones. That's a lot of hardware. They want to, you know, they want to recoup some minor percentage of that revenue or lost revenue. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to flat out say it. Some exciting stuff coming next week that neither one of us can talk about.
Okay. Yes.
I believe it involves benchmarking.
Yeah, I need to go get started on that.
I don't know. I'm not going to. But is there any non-NDA covered things you can promote that are coming up on PC Perth?
Tomorrow we're going to have our review of the open bench table up, which is this fairly thick aluminum milled open air test bench that like compresses and it basically, I keep saying it folds flat, doesn't really fold, but all of the pieces to it kind of are organized into the frame. And so if you wanted to travel with it, it can be, less than an inch thick with all the components you need to build the test bench, obviously minus like your motherboard and video card and all that stuff. But it's really cool, very high quality, kind of expensive, but we'll have a review and a video up on that tonight or tomorrow. And then let's see, I see over in the corner the Corsair One PC is being tested. So
really?
We'll see. Yeah, we got one of those in, so we'll see what it's like. So far, the out-of-box experience has been very good. Like the quality of the way the box comes and the shipping and how you remove it from the chat or from the enclosure and everything is pretty interesting. And we got the highest. I think we got the high-end config, 1080 GTX 1080, 960 gig SSD. So we'll see how it stacks up in the long run.
So, one, that's Corsair's first PC that they've built from the ground up.
Yep.
I just wanted to say it was funny. Like, do you think anybody's actually going to travel with the open bench table, or if people are just going to buy it because it's this wicked cool,
Yeah, I don't. There are overclockers, and there are. Some people that would travel with it. Maybe travel is not the best, but like it folds away and it's easily stored, right? Mm-hmm. So it's good for that. For and again, an open test bench is not really useful for a ton of people. If you're building a computer that you maybe upgrade once a year, then you don't need to have. You can put it in a normal case. That's going to be way better for your thermals and acoustics and all that stuff. But for somebody who is changing out parts frequently, you're doing a lot of overclocking and tweaking, you want access to the reset button, the BIOS reset buttons and stuff, that can be super helpful. So, reviewers, YouTube guys that are doing stuff, tweakers, overclockers, there are some environments where it makes sense. But
it's really
also
pretty.
A low-run item. Yeah, it is. And it is just as pretty in person. As well, it's way better than any of the other stuff that we've used for that purpose here, with the exception. I don't know. I did kind of like the Puget Systems acrylic test bed we got, but it's expensive as well because they're low run items.
Well, I mean, it's it's $159 in the silver edition, which is less than that case we just talked about earlier in the show. If you want the black or the red anodized version, it's $199. Doesn't seem that outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, in comparison to other low, I keep saying to low run types things like this, it's fine. Like it fits in with the Puget build, it fit in with the Antec skeleton, you know, those other types of things. So it's expensive relative to like, hey, you can get a full case for $60. That's really nice. That has doors and side panels and is fully enclosed. It's just a different type of thing. So
there you have it. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. It's a different kind of thing. You can find me at techthing.com or avxl.com. You can find Mr. Shrout at pcper.com, and you can find both of us on the Twitters at Ryan Shrout or at Patrick Norton. With that, we want to thank each and every one of you for listening, and to remind you that if you go to twitch.tv/TWiCH, you can find all of our older episodes and information on how to subscribe and do more. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.